Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I've got a full review to do for you on this interesting everyday carry fixed blade. This is a Wirtz Made Pygmy. It is a knife designed by Wirtz Made and built by Wirtz Made here in the US, which is really cool, and it's designed to be an everyday carry fixed blade. I always think it's a little interesting, like you can kind of split hairs on what everyday carry should mean because different people have different everydays, right? Like people do different things. But in essence, an everyday carry fixed blade is designed to be one that can be comfortably carried in a way other than like vertically on a belt. It's not like a belt knife per se, usually. And it's meant to be like kind of concealable, easy enough to carry, light enough to carry that it's not going to bother you, and to kind of replace the role of like an EDC folder. It should be, I mean, for most people, if they carry a knife, it's one knife. It's weirdos like me who oftentimes carry more than one, but this would be like, the idea is that it would go in your pocket where your folder would go. So this EDC fixed blade does a number of interesting things compared to some others that I've reviewed. I've also reviewed another Wirtz Made knife in the past, their Falcon model, and it's one of my favorite outdoor belt knives. I love that knife. So I love that they're now broadening their horizons. They have this model. I think they're also working on a kitchen knife, which is really cool. They may have even delivered some of those already. But big shout out to Wirtz Made. They'll be linked down below. Love those guys over there. When Randy originally reached out to me before I ever even reviewed the Falcon, he made sure that I understood that what he was asking for wasn't a biased like promotional video, but he was asking for a review. They want feedback. And so they sent me this for free, just like they did the Falcon, so that I can review it and also give them feedback, which I think is really cool and is fair to say. So they did give this to me, but they're not looking for me to just like sing its praises and not point out anything that I would change about it. That's part of the process. So this is the Pygmy. I'm going to start by kind of talking about the sheath since it's in the sheath, and I actually have two sheaths here, and there's one other that exists that I don't have, but these sheaths are really interesting. These are done by Soulbound Leather. I've had a number of things from Soulbound Leather at this point. It's always really good quality. The leather itself is super nice. This sheath is using an ulti-clip, which if you're not familiar with an ulti-clip, it's kind of an interesting design. So you've got this like front plate here that is actually hinged. And when you pop that open, it releases some tension on this kind of hooked metal clip. So the idea behind this is with this clip, instead of attaching it like around a belt or running a belt through it or something, you just clip this onto the actual like fabric of what you're wearing. So if you're carrying this knife inside the waistband, say you've got it right hand, like strong side in the waistband where you would put a belt knife, if you do it like this, now it's kind of down here on the inside of your pants. It's this deep, and then only this much is sticking up above your waistband. So it's pretty concealed compared to an out of the waistband carry. In addition to that, you can also just literally clip this onto your pocket. Like I almost always carry, pretty much always carry my primary folder in my front right pocket, clipped onto the pocket. And so with this, I can clip this fixed blade into the same exact spot. And then granted, it's not like deep carry compared to a deep carry folder. I have this much knife sticking out of my pocket then. But if I'm going somewhere where I don't need to worry about a lot of knife sticking out of my pocket, or I'm working on stuff around the house and the yard, etc., which is one of the ways I've used this knife a lot, then that's a great way to carry it because it's still right where I reach for my knife in terms of muscle memory. I like that about it. Anyway, the leather work is really good. The ulti-clip, I really like. I like ulti-clips on a number of things that I've had, both in knives and in like firearm accessories. And so it's familiar, it's easy enough for me to use, and I like it. The retention on the sheath is great. I'm not like, the knife isn't slipping out of here. There's no weird wobble or rattle. You can hear a tiny tick of the ulti-clip because it has moving parts, but it's just a nice, smooth, soft leather that feels nice. I like it. You can see also it's formed to the handle of the knife itself. You can see some contours on the handle there, and then you've got the blade in there. So with this sheath, it carries really quite well. I'll talk more about carry in specifics when I get to like that kind of part of my breakdown, but I want to talk about the other types of sheaths as well, because when I unboxed this, I wasn't positive why there were two different. I think I might have kind of figured it out, but afterwards I was talking to Randy from Wirtz Made, and he explained a little more in depth. So this sheath is a mirror image of the other one that I was sent. if you look at them, they just go opposite of each other. And this one also has an ulti-clip. So it's just the reverse of this sheath. So the reasoning behind that, why I have two that he sent me to check out, is in case I just wanted to carry it different ways, right? So if I'm carrying this knife like inside the waistband on my right side, this is great. But if I carry it inside the waistband on my left side, then now the knife is backwards. I'd be drawing it in like a reverse draw, which is typically not how I prefer to draw my knife. Although if you wanted to, you could. And then if you wanted to do that on the other side, you could use this sheath, because now if I were to put it in this side in the waistband, then I'd be drawing in a reverse draw. So there's just options here in terms of like which pocket you would put it in, or where on your waistline you would put it, so that it can clip anywhere, and between the two sheaths you can have your like kind of preference. I imagine, I'm not sure about this, I think when you buy this knife you specify which sheath you want and then you get that one. So I don't think they're like sending two to everybody. But it was nice for me to have the option and see how it carried in different ways, and this ended up being the one that I just kind of stuck with, because I could put it in my right front pocket and it drew the way that I was used to a knife drawing out of that pocket. And then even sometimes if I clipped it like into my back pocket, I would still draw in a way that felt natural. So I liked that about it. All right, anyway, so this Pygmy, let's talk materials real quick and then I'll jump into Ergo's carry cutting. This one is in, oh, I forget which blade steel he used. Now I feel like a chump. I'll put it in the description if I remember to do so. He only uses stuff that frankly I think is really good for the application of an EDC fixed blade, and you can see there's definitely some wear on here. I've been using this guy and it has been awesome. Another good thing is every time I actually take the time to clean it, it's cleaned up really well. Maybe I should have cleaned it before this. Maybe this will evidence that I actually use my knives. I don't know. Anyway, so I forget what the steel is, but you can see we've got a nice belt satin on the grinds. Nice drop point blade shape, pretty simple. We've got a nice sharpening choil that's deep. You're going to get a lot of sharpenings before you run into any issues there. And then this handle material is a really cool carbon, kind of a camo carbon or a fat carbon, or I don't know, there's a bunch of names and a few different providers now of this type of carbon material. Maybe it's carbon plate, I don't know. But this is kind of like an American style of it. You've got red, white, and blue ceramic coming through layers of kind of like unilateral or unilayered or unidirectional, I don't know what you'd call it, carbon. So it's ceramic and carbon put together to make this really cool color scheme of red, white, and blue that I'm hoping in this yellow artificial light is picking up okay. But yeah, really, really cool material, and it feels nice. One of the things that's impressive to me about the Wirtz Made knives, all of the ones that I've handled, is that the fit and finish is really just like excellent. And on a lot of fixed blades, I don't know, I guess most of the fixed blades that I find myself drawn towards, like user fixed blades that I'm going to feel comfortable using, that aren't insanely expensive but are really nice, you see a lot of more like working finish stuff. You see a lot of micarta, you see a lot of like stone washing, and here you just get like this really cool blend of, they use a lot of really cool handle materials. They're using a variety of finishes because we've got stone washing up here and then belt satin down here. Their belt satins are gorgeous. You've got like polishing around the spine. You can see, if I can get this to focus, wow, that is not doing well, is it? It's really kind of highly polished around there. So their finishing is just excellent. And I feel like for the money, these are a really impressive value. And granted, I'm saying that without having purchased this, right? They sent me this for free. But I've paid a lot more for a lot less knife, in my opinion. Like, for this to be made in the US with this level of material selection, and finished this well and put together, like the fit is also just supreme. Everything feels like, the way that these handles meet the tang almost feels like if I was blind, I would think it's all just one material, like it's an integral fixed blade or something. It just, the seams are perfect. Everything is fitted really, really well. It's rare to find that level of craftsmanship built in the US at the price point that they're offering these at. So I'll link the site down below. You can see also there's a ton of variety of finishes or not finishes, but materials that they use. Like the handle materials that I see them posting on Instagram, which I'll link below as well. It's like they're always working on some cool, interesting handle material, and it's really, really fun to watch. But also I love that they're doing these kind of in a production way, but they're also like a father-son team building these in the US, kind of custom doing them. They're using CNC and some other processes at this point, but it's like mid-techy. I don't know where you put it. Like, it's cool. All right, so let's talk Ergo's carry cutting. There's no action because it's a fixed blade, so there's no fidgetiness here, but we'll start with Ergo's. You can see the profile of this is fairly neutral, but we've also got some shape going on, right? This handle is not just a rectangle. We've got a lot of swell coming out towards the back. Almost reminds me of like a gun stock pattern in a little bit of a way. We've got what comes into like a groove choil type of area up here. Nice gradual radius up at the top. That's very neutral. But in terms of having the kind of guard, or I don't know, choil here, followed by a curve that then recurves back in, allows your other fingers to have another spot that they're supposed to land, and then a big swell at the back. This knife, even though it's incredibly smooth in all of its fit and finish, feels really locked in to my hand. My pinky lands beyond the kind of end of the swell, but these three fingers feel so locked in, and then the pinky still has handle to rest on, to where it's not just floating off in the ether. That bothers me sometimes when my pinky just has nowhere to go and it feels like lost because there's nothing to even contact it. This works because my pinky still has a spot to land. It's just past that kind of last point of the handle, if that makes sense. The way that this point nestles into my palm feels really locked in, feels really natural. It does not feel harsh at all, feels smooth and rounded and comfortable. The jimping happens to land exactly where my thumb lands, and it's so non-aggressive as jimping goes. Like, this jimping is totally okay with me. I'm somebody who generally prefers no jimping. I prefer Ergos over jimping. But in this case, it lands right where it should land. It's not aggressive to the point where it's ever been painful or annoying, even when I'm doing extended, like processing a bunch of cardboard and pushing through a bunch of things. The jimping hasn't bothered me even once, and it's so well placed and well thought out as to where it lands and how it's spaced and how it's not too aggressive, but it does add a little traction. So I like that. So in a saber grip, which is the way that I mostly hold and use knives, this knife just excels. It's great. Hammer grip, also comfortable. My pinky starts to land a little more on the point like that, so sometimes I have to kind of find the spot in a hammer grip, but it works. Saber, for some reason, my pinky knows right where to go. But anyways, saber grip is great. Hammer grip is really good, bordering on great. Reverse, or kind of a draw cut, if you will, very comfortable, surprisingly comfortable. The way that this lands in palm, if I were to cut through something that way, feels really nice. Reverse grip, super comfortable. It kind of baffles me that this knife, even though it's shaped as much as it is here along this line, that in like changing the grip, it still feels like it locks in a really nice way. I like the way my thumb wraps around the top of this for a little added security there. That feels great. And then reverse grip draw cut is like totally fine, but it's not shining like the other grips are in terms of feeling like, ooh, this was meant to go this way. It doesn't feel like it was meant to go this way, but it also feels like I could totally, like, sometimes I'm cutting open like a bag of soil or like Traeger pellets and stuff like that in that way. That would totally work in that application. That's a fine grip to use this knife in. So ergonomically, I feel like this knife is a big win. I feel like one of the things that's most difficult, frankly, about everyday carry fixed blades is that the ergos can sometimes suffer, because in order to make a knife carryable to the point where someone will actually EDC it, you generally have to get so small on a fixed blade that you start to like sacrifice some ergos and some blade length, and like you have to cut from somewhere, right? Because if you're trying to make the whole thing a small package, then there's only blade or handle to take from on a fixed blade. So I like that this strikes a good balance of being a knife that doesn't feel too small. This knife feels more capable than just about any folder that I could carry. Because it's a fixed blade, it has no moving parts, it's got plenty of blade length for, it's like compared to most of my folders, I won't feel like I'm suffering on blade length here, but I'm also getting a full handle to use and interface with. So it's striking a good balance in that way. Now, is it as carryable as something tiny like a Jacob Ginsberg chickadee? No. And I have a chickadee and I love it. And part of why I love it is because it's like the easiest to carry EDC fixed blade I've ever had. So this is going to carry a little bit bigger than that, but this also feels more hand filling and robust. And I'd be more prone to doing moderate to heavy duty tasks with it than I would with the chickadee. The chickadee is like a light duty knife in my opinion, just because of the way that I have to hold it to use it. Anyway, I guess now we'll slip into carry because I'm kind of there, aren't I? Carrying this knife, like I mentioned when I talked about the sheath, I think it's pleasant because this knife has these options and you can specify which sheath orientation you want. You have the ability to carry this with the ulti clip in your pocket, right where you'd put your primary folder. You can carry it inside the waistband like appendix or strong side, behind your back, wherever you want. You can move this around your belt line and just clip it on with the ulti clip. I like that. If you're opposite handed and you want it to work for your left hand, you just specify the other sheath. Or if you want to carry it right handed in a way that's not like I described, like you could carry this outside of your waistband, clipping it on this way, that could totally work. In fact, I did try that once, and to me, I don't generally like carrying EDC fixed blades vertically outside of the waistband because then I feel like I'm just showing so much of the knife. I like for it to be a little more concealed, but that's an option. Another thing I didn't mention about sheaths already that I should have is he also has a Kydex sheath option that is horizontal. Now, eventually, I'd like to get one of those because generally, the way that I feel best about carrying an EDC fixed blade is on the front of my body, kind of appendix, if you will, horizontal, so I can draw it just like this. That's the way that I've found to work best for me in EDCing a fixed blade. And most of the EDC fixed blades that I've kept and that I still like keep in my rotation, I carry horizontally front of body. So that is an option. I'm assuming, I haven't held that sheath, but I'm assuming because of the work that I have observed of theirs, that it's going to be good as well and it's going to function nicely. So there's options on how you can carry this, which makes it way more approachable. Because when you're talking fixed blades, so much of the equation as to whether it ends up being a good knife for you to actually own and use is the sheath. A great fixed blade with a crappy sheath is a crappy fixed blade, because then how do you carry it, right? Like, unless it's a kitchen knife, I don't really keep many knives around that I just like grab when I'm going to use them. Usually I need to carry it to the place that I'm going to use it or have it on me when I'm doing the chores that I'm going to be using it for. It's not like a fixed blade can really stand on its own 2 feet unless it's carryable in most cases. So the fact that there's options here and that they're all nice, I like. My favorite way that I found to carry this, I think like I mentioned probably multiple times now, is just in my front pocket where my folder would typically go, because it's where I'm going to reach for it. And I generally wear shirts that are a little longer these days, so it's usually covering the amount that's kind of sticking up proud above my pocket, which would be about this much. It's not so exorbitantly wide that I can't get my wallet in the same pocket with it like I do when I'm carrying a folder. So it's been a really unobtrusive way to carry it, is to just put it where my primary folder would typically go. I've also carried it inside the waistband. Like I mentioned, I tried it outside the waistband, and that's just kind of become my favorite way. But either that or my back pocket have been my go-to. That's been one of the keys too. I've carried this knife a ton around the house. I'm actually just like around the house more lately than I am out of the house, is I think what's actually happening. But when I've been doing little tasks around the house and in the yard, and I've been like working on gardening and sprucing the place up a bit, in my back pocket on my right side, this has been an awesome thing to clip into the corner of that pocket and just have where, even when I'm bending over and stuff, if it's in my front pocket, I'm feeling it more. So if it's back there, I like don't feel it. And then when I need it, it's just right there, still easy to grab, draw, use, and then resheath. And it feels very like comfortable in that way. So I like the diversity of this sheath setup. All right, so that leaves us with cutting performance. Cutting with this knife is awesome. One of the things I like, so there is this movement in the knife world towards like really thin behind the edge geometry. And I love that. The knife that I designed and some subsequent knives that I'm working on designing with Ryan through Love Concepts, we're generally going for thin behind the edge for the types of folders that we're designing. But this knife is, although not thick behind the edge, it doesn't feel like it's trying to go for laser beam super thin geometry. It seems like it's going a little more for like more robust, hard use, like user energy. And it's not that thin behind the edge can't be hard use, but sometimes it feels a little scary to do certain cutting tasks with a knife that is thin behind the edge, because if you're cutting through something, imagine I'm cutting toward the camera, and then kind of like pulling out of the cut while still in the resistance, and you get that like popping off of the edge. Say you're going through a zip tie, which I've done quite a few of with this knife at this point, to go under the zip tie, right? You've got like the band right here. You've got to insert the knife under, and then the way I do it is to kind of like pop off of whatever's under the zip tie, push the edge into the zip tie to the point where it pops off. Doing that with a knife that has really thin geometry is scary because there's less material to support itself, right? And so this geometry feels like they ground it in the most appropriate way for what I feel this knife is designed to be. And I like that they didn't just go super thin because that's like a buzzword of the moment. They designed it for the way that it should work. All that being said, this is a really thin blade stock to begin with, and then the grind comes up a reasonable height, and this knife feels like the type of thing that I could be outdoorsy with. And in fact, I've batoned through small pieces of wood. You know, I have a ton of blade length here, so it's not like I'm batoning through whole logs here, but I've batoned through wood with it. I've done wood shavings. I've done like outdoorsy, like fire prep type of tasks with it, and it's done great. If it was ground much thinner than this, especially for how thin this blade stock is, I wouldn't feel as comfortable using it in those situations. On top of that, when I've processed a bunch of cardboard, because it's thin stock, because it's a flat grind and that tends to flow a certain way through material, because the edge is done really well and it's held really well, it's a breeze through cardboard and stuff too. So it's balanced in a way that I like. It's also the type of knife that, like, when I've put it through an apple, it's cutting the apple pretty well. I would say there's like a little bit of splitting happening, if that makes sense. Like a super thin knife will slice the apple without any like pop of the apple splitting before you're through the cut. A thicker knife is gonna like chisel the apple apart, and you're gonna start the cut, and then the force of it wedging the piece is gonna make it pop apart. This makes it like the majority of the way through the cut, if not all the way most of the time, but there's a little bit of a split too. That's a super unscientific way to describe all of this, isn't it? Hopefully that made some sense. I love it. I love cutting with this knife. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned over time is so much of the cutting performance of a knife actually ends up being like the ergos. Because if the knife is ground well, has a good edge on it, but is hard to hold on to and use because it doesn't interface with your hand well, then it doesn't feel like a good cutter. It will for like specific dainty little things where you don't have to bear down on it. But as soon as you're doing something where you have to like really grip onto a knife and push through, or you're doing extended cutting where you're cutting a lot of things, it's almost more about the ergos than it is about the blade geometry and the edge that's put on. Or I guess maybe it's like a bigger part of the equation. It's not more than the blade, because if you had a dull blade, it doesn't matter how good the handle is, does it? Anyways, I'm off in the weeds now. This knife is, I like it. Like, if we recap, carry, it did great. Cutting, it does great. Ergos, it's awesome. Like, this as an EDC fixed blade is just one of the better options that I think is currently out there. And I've tried quite a few. I've owned quite a few EDC fixed blades. In the last while even, I've shown a handful on the channel, but because I've been recording less, I haven't really stopped buying knives as much, and I've tried quite a few that, maybe not quite a few, I've tried a few lately that I would say don't compete with this. I've tried some that do. There's a couple of players in the game right now that are doing a really good job, but from Wirtz Made, I feel like they've done an awesome like distilling of taking the properties of their Falcon, which is the model that I already loved, and making it just enough more compact and like just reworking it to the point, not saying this is the same knife but scaled down, but it feels true to their other model. It feels like it's part of a lineup, and it feels like the one that is designed to go with you everywhere, every day. And they've compacted their design language into this package in a way that I like. I think it came out really, really well. And on top of that, like, to be built in the US, to have such cool materials and finishes, and to, like, even their packaging is really cool. If you watch the unboxing, you'll have seen that. Like, they're really thinking it through, and they're not skipping any steps. They're not rushing anything at Wirtz Made. And I love that about them. Like, we talked about them getting me this knife for a while, and they didn't want to send it to me until they had, like, everything figured out. They didn't want to rush the process and just say, Jake, we're going to send you this knife so you can get a video up, and hopefully that'll build some, like, I don't know, buzz about it, and then people will give us orders. No, they took their time, and they got it to where they were really happy with the packaging and the sheath setup and all these things. All of the unknowns became knowns before they put it out there. And sometimes I think people are, like, testing their product on the market, and these guys are much more, like, unwilling to put something out until they feel like it's really, really nailed down. Which I guess there's value to both sides of that, but I like that they're doing it the way they are, because it comes out so good. Anyway, I think it's great. I really like it. I also like the people behind the company. So am I biased about the product because I like the people behind it? Absolutely. To say I'm not would be a total lie. And that happens with most things that I buy, knives and otherwise. Like, if I like the people behind the project, it makes me smile more behind the product. It makes me smile more when I use the product, and it makes me more inclined to enjoy it because I feel like I'm having a piece of something that I want to be more a part of. So that is true, but I've also really tried to put this knife through its paces and look at it objectively and find the things that I genuinely like about it, and be open to finding things that I didn't like about it. And really, I don't think anything that I would be like, you guys should change this. I think they've really thought this knife out incredibly well. It seems like something that could have come from somebody who's designed 100 knives before getting here, and really they've only designed a handful and they're already here, which is really cool to see. Yeah, anyway, I think the only thing left for me is, like, to try the Kydex horizontal sheath, because that may make me love it even more. But even if I got that sheath and was like, this sheath actually isn't for me, this is a rare case where I don't prefer it, then this sheath works so well that, like, with this sheath, this knife is going to continue to be in my rotation. It's going to be in my drawer of fixed blades, which is way more limited than my cases and cases of folders, and it'll be one that makes it into the rotation. So anyway, thanks for watching. This has been kind of a long one, a little bit of a doozy. Sorry, but also maybe you're welcome, because I haven't been posting a lot lately. Here's something big to feast on. That's what she said. All right, thanks guys. I appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next one. Again, the Wirtz team, all of their stuff will be linked down below, so check them out. They're great guys. All right, see you guys.